The ballroom was a gilded cage, its air thick with the competing scents of hothouse lilies and old money. Light from a dozen crystal chandeliers fractured across a sea of champagne flutes, making diamonds glitter on wrists and throats. It was the annual Metropolitan Foundation Gala, the apex of New York's philanthropic season, where fortunes were pledged on whispers and reputations were made or broken over chilled lobster medallions. But beneath the polished surface of charity, Anya Sharma felt the familiar current of ambition, a low, predatory hum. Tonight, that hum was directed at her. Anya stood near the edge of the stage, a statuesque figure in a sapphire silk gown that shimmered like a twilight sky. Her company, Phoenix Bio, had just been honored for developing a low-cost, shelf-stable synthetic blood substitute, a breakthrough poised to save millions of lives in remote and disaster-stricken regions. At 34, she was the youngest recipient of the Foundation's Humanitarian Innovation Award, and the whispers that followed her were a mixture of awe and envy. She had, by all accounts, risen from the ashes. The master of ceremonies for the evening was Marcus Thorne, CEO of Ethelred Incorporated, the monolithic pharmaceutical giant that had dominated the industry for half a century. He was a man sculpted from charisma and ambition, with a politician's smile and a shark's eyes. He commanded the stage, his voice a smooth baritone that wrapped the audience in a warm embrace. "And now," Marcus began, his gaze sweeping the room before landing, with practiced precision, on Anya. "It is my distinct honor to present the Humanitarian Innovation Award to a true visionary, the brilliant Dr. Anya Sharma." Polite, sustained applause filled the room. Anya offered a small, composed smile and made her way to the stage, her steps measured and graceful. She was acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes on her peers, rivals, investors, and the city's power brokers. She had learned long ago that in rooms like this, control was everything. Marcus met her at the center of the stage, handing her the heavy, star-shaped crystal award. His hand brushed hers, his touch cool and proprietary. "Congratulations, Anya," he murmured, his smile never wavering. He then turned back to the microphone, raising his champagne flute. "A toast," he announced, his voice resonating through the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system. "To Anya Sharma, a woman who proves that true genius, like the mythical bird she named her company after, can rise from even the most spectacular of flames." A collective, sharp intake of breath rippled through the audience. The air crackled with a sudden, unbearable tension. It was not a compliment. It was an assassination, delivered with a smile. The spectacular flames were not a myth to Anya. They were the memory of a cold November night 12 years ago. The acrid smell of smoke, the wail of sirens, and the sight of her first lab, her life's work. Her dreams being devoured by a fire the investigators had ruled an accident, but one for which whispers of her own negligence had never fully died. The event had nearly destroyed her, professionally and personally. Marcus had just ripped open that scar in front of the entire world. He continued, his tone dripping with false sincerity. "It's truly admirable how you've rebuilt from such humble beginnings. So few have the resilience to overcome early miscalculations." The coded insult was a masterpiece of cruelty, plausibly deniable, yet utterly devastating. He had called her a failure, careless, and insinuated that her current success was a fluke born from a tragedy of her own making. The silence in the room was now deafening. All eyes were on Anya, waiting for a reaction. They expected tears, a flash of anger, a stammered defense. Anya did none of those things. She stood perfectly still, the crystal award cold in her hands. She let the silence stretch, holding the gaze of every person in that room who had ever doubted her, underestimated her, or whispered behind her back. Then, she turned her head slowly to face Marcus Thorne. Her expression was not one of anger, but of something far more unsettling, a serene, analytical calm. It was the look of a scientist observing a particularly odious specimen under a microscope. She leaned into the microphone, her voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. A miscalculation, Marcus, or an education, she asked, her tone conversational. Yet each word was a carefully sharpened dart. I find that the most valuable lessons are often the most expensive. Thank you for reminding me, and this esteemed audience, of the price of innovation. She then raised the award slightly, and thank you, to the Foundation, for this honor. My work has taught me that the most important thing you can build from ashes isn't a company. It's a better future. With a final, cool nod to the stunned audience, she walked off the stage. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then thunderous. A wave of admiration for her extraordinary composure. But Anya didn't hear it. The sound of her own heartbeat was a war drum in her ears. Marcus Thorne had made a grave error. He thought he had exposed a weakness, a scar she had spent years trying to forget. He was wrong. He had not reopened a wound. He had just handed her a weapon and reminded her exactly why she needed to use it. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. The lobby of the Ethelred Tower was a monument to brutalist efficiency, all polished concrete, smoked glass, and silence. It was designed to intimidate, to communicate a power so absolute it required no adornment. The only warmth came from the faint, blue glow of the stock ticker, its numbers scrolling with the dispassionate certainty of a cardiogram. Anya's company, Phoenix Bio, was a stark contrast. Her headquarters, housed in a repurposed brick warehouse in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, was a vibrant ecosystem of collaboration and light, with open-plan labs, walls covered in scientific equations, and the constant hum of minds at work. It was a place of creation. Ethelred was a place of dominion. 2 weeks had passed since the gala. The incident had become the talk of the industry. A brief, delicious scandal that had been analyzed and replayed at every power lunch in Manhattan. The consensus was that Anya had handled it with remarkable grace, turning a public humiliation into a moment of strength. But for Anya, it was a declaration of war. Marcus's attack had not been random. It was a calculated move to undermine her, just as Phoenix Bio was preparing for a new round of funding. A move designed to paint her as unstable, a risk. It reawakened a cold, dormant resolve within her. For 12 years, she had focused on rebuilding, on proving the whispers wrong through sheer, undeniable success. She had told herself that was revenge enough. She had been wrong. True justice required not just success, but accountability. Her father, Dr. Samir Sharma, had been a titan in the world of biochemistry, a brilliant, passionate man who had taught Anya to see the universe in a single cell. Now, Parkinson's disease had waged a cruel war against his body, trapping his still luminous mind in a cage of tremors and slow, halting movements. He lived in a sunlit room in her spacious apartment overlooking the East River, surrounded by his books and journals. He wanted to remind them, "You were an outsider," Samir said, his voice a soft, tremulous whisper. When she recounted the events of the gala, he sat in his favorite leather armchair, a heavy blanket across his lap, despite the warmth of the room. Men like Thorne build their empires on foundations of certainty. Your success, your very existence, is a disruption. It frightens them. Anya adjusted the blanket around his frail shoulders. It was more than that. Dad. It was personal. The way he looked at me. Her father's gaze drifted to the window, a flicker of something unreadable in his tired eyes. Power makes everything personal. Anya, remember that. The memory of the fire was a ghost that still haunted her. She had been 22, a prodigy who had just secured her first round of seed funding for a revolutionary gene sequencing technique. The lab was her sanctuary, her entire world. The fire had taken everything: her research, her equipment, her credibility. The official report cited faulty wiring in an old building, but the insurance company had used a clause about hazardous materials to deny most of the claim, and her investors had vanished overnight. The whispers started almost immediately. Had she been careless, cut corners for years? The shame had clung to her like the smell of smoke. But Marcus Thorne's public cruelty had burned away the last vestiges of that shame and replaced it with cold, hard clarity. It was time to stop wondering about the past and start investigating it. The inciting incident, the catalyst for her new war, came not from a dramatic revelation, but from a quiet moment of scientific inquiry. Ethelred had recently fast-tracked a new class of antiviral drugs, branded Ethel V, which was generating billions in revenue. The drug's mechanism was hailed as revolutionary, a novel approach to disrupting viral replication that had stumped researchers for decades. Reading the published papers, Anya felt a disquieting sense of familiarity. The core molecular structure, the unique protein-binding pathway, it echoed the foundational principles of her own graduate research. The very work she had believed, lost forever in the fire. It was a phantom limb, an idea she knew as intimately as her own DNA, now existing in the world under another's name. It was impossible. Of course. Her data had been on a single server, its backups stored in a fireproof safe that had been found warped and melted, its contents fused into a useless block of metal and plastic. All of her physical notes had been incinerated. Or so she had been told. That evening, she bypassed her company's chief of security and made a call to a man who operated in the gray spaces of the corporate world. Leo Martinez was a digital ghost, a forensic investigator who had once been a rising star at the FBI's cybercrime division before a disagreement over ethics led him to the more lucrative and morally flexible private sector. He was loyal, discreet, and legendarily persistent. Anya had used him once before to quietly vet a potential business partner. They met in a nondescript coffee shop in Tribeca. Leo was a small, unassuming man in his late 40s, with a perpetually tired expression that belied a mind that moved at the speed of light. "I need you to find something that may not exist," Anya began, placing a tablet on the table between them. On the screen were two complex molecular diagrams. The one on the left is the core of Ethelred's new antiviral. The one on the right is a theoretical model for my graduate thesis, the one that was supposedly destroyed in a fire 12 years ago. Leo studied the screen, his fingers drumming a silent, complex rhythm on the tabletop. "You think they stole it?" It wasn't a question. "I think it's a statistical impossibility for two independent research teams to arrive at this exact same, highly unconventional solution," Anya said, "but I have no proof, no paper trail. Nothing survived the fire. Things are rarely gone forever." "Dr. Sharma," Leo said, a faint smile touching his lips. "They just get misplaced. Ethelred's digital security is world-class, but their human security is like any other corporations, full of people who are underpaid, overlooked, or disgruntled. That's the real firewall, and it's always full of holes." He took a sip of his espresso. "This will be expensive. And if Thorne finds out I'm sniffing around, he'll get unpleasant." "Find me a link, Leo," Anya said, her voice low and intense. Find me one thread, connecting my old research to their new drug. I'll handle the expense. And I'll handle Marcus Thorne. Leo's search began with a deep dive into the public record. He mapped the careers of every key scientist on Ethelred's Ethel V development team. He was looking for a connection, however tenuous, to Anya's old university, her professors, or even the contract cleaners who had worked at her burned-out lab. For weeks, the work yielded nothing. Ethelred had built a pristine, impenetrable narrative around the drug's discovery. Meanwhile, Anya initiated the first phase of her own plan, with the help of her closest confidant and Phoenix Bio's COO, Chloe Rivera. She began to build a legal case. Chloe, a sharp, pragmatic lawyer who had been with Anya since the early days, was skeptical. "Anya, we have nothing but a hunch," Chloe argued. Pacing Anya's office, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room. "We can't go after Ethelred based on a feeling of familiarity. They'll bury us in legal fees and countersue us into oblivion. Thorne is just waiting for an excuse to come after us." "So we won't go after them directly," Anya said calmly, her eyes fixed on the intricate web of corporate ownership she had mapped out on her whiteboard. "Not yet. We'll start with a formal inquiry. A letter from our patent attorneys, citing similarities and requesting clarification on their research and development timeline. It's a standard intellectual property query. It's polite, professional, non-threatening." "To anyone but Marcus Thorne," Chloe countered. "He'll see it as a direct challenge." "Good," Anya said. "I want him to." The letter was sent. For a week, there was silence. Then, the response came, not from Ethelred's legal department, but from the world at large. An anonymous, highly detailed story appeared in a prominent industry blog, alleging that Phoenix Bio's synthetic blood substitute had failed critical safety tests, and that the company was covering it up. The article cited falsified data points and unnamed internal sources. It was a complete fabrication, but it was expertly crafted to sow doubt. Within hours, Phoenix Bio's stock began to slide. Investors called, their voices laced with panic. The FDA announced a preliminary inquiry. It was a vicious, perfectly executed corporate assault. Anya stood in the center of her main lab, watching her team field frantic calls. The vibrant, creative energy of her company had been replaced by a palpable sense of fear. Marcus hadn't just returned fire. He had launched a nuclear strike. Chloe found her there, her face grim. Their lawyers just filed a countersuit. Corporate defamation. They're seeking damages that would bankrupt us. "Anya, he's trying to kill the company." Anya looked at the faces of her scientists, the brilliant young minds she had mentored and nurtured. She saw the fear in their eyes, the doubt. In that moment, she understood. A legal battle was a war of attrition, a game Marcus Thorne was better equipped to win. He had more money, more lawyers, more influence. Trying to fight him on his terms was a fool's errand. She turned to Chloe, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Cancel the legal team. Withdraw the inquiry." "What?" Chloe asked, bewildered. "We're just going to let him win." "No," Anya said, a new, dangerous strategy solidifying in her mind. "We're not going to sue him. We're going to buy him." She pointed to the Ethelred logo on a nearby monitor. "We're going to take his company, every lab, every patent, every last brick. And we're going to do it so quietly. He won't know what's happening until I'm sitting in his chair." The first obstacle had not defeated her. It had merely shown her the correct path. The war would not be fought in a courtroom. It would be fought on the stock market, in the shadows. And Anya was prepared to burn every bridge and risk everything she had built to see it through. The strategy was audacious, bordering on impossible. Ethelred Inc. was a corporate behemoth with a market capitalization of over $100 billion. Phoenix Bio, while successful, was a fraction of that size. A direct takeover was out of the question. What Anya envisioned was a creeping acquisition, a slow, methodical accumulation of stock through a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore investment vehicles, designed to keep her identity as the ultimate buyer hidden until the last possible moment. It was a high-stakes game of financial chess, and Anya needed a grandmaster. She found one in Julian Croft, a legendary but reclusive hedge fund manager who had made his fortune by betting against corporate Goliaths. Croft operated from a minimalist penthouse in London, communicating almost exclusively through encrypted channels. He agreed to meet Anya not because of the potential profit, but because he despised Marcus Thorne, who had once double-crossed him in a deal years ago. Thorne is a predator who mistakes his ruthlessness for intelligence. Croft's voice crackled through the secure video link, his face a mosaic of pixels. Taking him down would be a public service, but it will cost you, not just money. To acquire a meaningful stake without him noticing, you will have to leverage everything you have, your company, your personal assets, everything. Everything, Anya confirmed without hesitation. While Julian Croft began to build the complex financial architecture for the acquisition, Leo Martinez continued his own hunt in the digital wilderness. He was searching for the human element, the weak link in Ethelred's chain of command. He found it in the form of Dr. Eris Thorne, Marcus's estranged uncle. Eris was a brilliant biochemist who had co-founded Ethelred with his brother, Marcus's father, Elias Thorne. But Eris had been forced out of the company decades ago after a bitter falling out. He now lived in quiet retirement in rural Vermont, painting landscapes and refusing all contact with the company that bore his family name. Leo discovered that Eris maintained an old, rarely used email account. After weeks of careful, patient social engineering, posing as a fellow academic, researching the history of the pharmaceutical industry, Leo finally received a reply. Eris Thorne was wary, but intrigued. Anya flew to Vermont herself. She found Eris in a rustic, book-filled home overlooking the Green Mountains. He was a thin, bird-like man in his late 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that held a deep and abiding sadness. "I know why you're here, Dr. Sharma," Eris said, after they had exchanged pleasantries over tea. "You believe my nephew stole your research. And you're right." Anya's heart hammered against her ribs. "You can prove it." "No," Eris said, shaking his head. "Elias was the businessman. I was the scientist. After he and Marcus forced me out, they scrubbed my legacy from the company. But I know how they operate. When Ethelred was struggling a decade ago, on the verge of losing its market share, I know Marcus was desperate. He would have done anything to find a breakthrough. He has his father's ambition, but none of his restraint." Eris walked to a dusty bookshelf and pulled down a bound leather ledger. "This is one of my old research journals from before I left. My brother always accused me of being a sentimentalist." He opened it to a page filled with complex equations and notes. "Elias and I had a fundamental disagreement about the ethics of acquisition. He believed in growth at any cost. He would acquire smaller labs, absorb their research, and discard the scientists. He called it strategic consolidation. I called it theft." As Anya looked at the journal, a particular name in the margins caught her eye. "Sharma. My father." She whispered, "You knew my father. Samir Sharma." A look of profound sorrow crossed Eris's face. "Samir, yes. He was the most brilliant mind I ever met. He worked at a rival company back then, Omnigen. Elias was obsessed with acquiring Omnigen. mostly to get his hands on Samir's work. There was a deal, a very aggressive one. It fell apart. It was a nasty business. A lot of people were hurt. He wouldn't say more, but he had given Anya a new thread to pull. The conflict with Marcus wasn't just about her. It had roots that went deeper, into her father's past. This wasn't just business. It was history. Leo's research, guided by this new information, shifted. He began digging into the history of Omnigen and its failed merger with Ethelred in the late 1980s. He found old, archived news articles detailing a brutal corporate battle. Omnigen had accused Ethelred of hostile tactics. Ethelred had accused Omnigen's leadership of financial misconduct. In the end, Omnigen had collapsed, its stock worthless. And in the fine print of the bankruptcy filings, Leo found it. The name of one of the families that had lost everything. Their entire fortune tied up in Omnigen stock, the Thorne family. Not Elias Thorne's branch, but that of his cousin, a smaller investor who had been wiped out. The name of that cousin's son was Marcus. Leo called Anya late one night, his voice tight with excitement. I think I know why this is so personal for Thorne. His father wasn't Elias Thorne, the co-founder. His father was a man named Robert Thorne, Elias's cousin. Robert put every penny he had into Omnigen on the advice of your father, who was his friend and colleague. When the Ethelred deal collapsed and Omnigen went under, Robert Thorne was ruined. He lost his house, his reputation, everything. A year later, he died of a heart attack. Marcus was 16. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Marcus wasn't just a corporate rival. He was a man on a decades-long quest for vengeance. He blamed her father for his family's destruction. Elias Thorne, his powerful uncle, had taken him in, given him a place at Ethelred, and fueled his desire for retribution. His entire life, his ascent to power, had been aimed at one goal: destroying the legacy of Samir Sharma. And she, Anya, was that legacy. The fire wasn't a coincidence. It was the opening salvo in his war. The fight was no longer just business. It was a blood feud. The revelation galvanized Anya. The creeping acquisition accelerated. Julian Croft executed a series of brilliant, high-risk financial maneuvers, leveraging Phoenix Bio's assets to their absolute limit. They now controlled nearly 15% of Ethelred, an astonishing feat that had gone completely unnoticed. But Marcus was no fool. The unusual trading activity, no matter how well disguised, eventually appeared on his radar. He didn't know who was behind it, but he knew someone was making a move on his company, and he responded with characteristic brutality. He launched his counterattack. Ethelred announced it was fast-tracking its own synthetic blood substitute, a direct competitor to Phoenix Bio's flagship product. The announcement was a lie. They had no such product in their pipeline, but the market didn't know that. They also initiated a hostile takeover bid for a smaller biotech firm that supplied a key reagent for Phoenix Bio's manufacturing process, threatening to cut off Anya's supply chain. Phoenix Bio's stock plummeted. Lenders issued margin calls. Anya's investors, already spooked by the previous smear campaign, began to bail. She was hemorrhaging money, her own company on the verge of collapse. It was Marcus's checkmate move, designed to force the anonymous buyer out of the shadows and into bankruptcy. Chloe stormed into her office, her face pale with panic. "We're done. Anya, the banks are calling in our loans. We have less than a week of operating capital left. We have to sell our Ethelred shares, cut our losses, and try to save the company." Anya stood before the window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk fell. She was calm, her mind working through the complex variables with terrifying speed. Croft had called her an hour earlier. "He's got you pinned." Anya, you have one move left. But it's a suicide run. You'd have to liquidate your personal holdings. Pledge the rest of your Phoenix stock, everything, for one final massive purchase of Ethelred shares. It would give you enough to force a shareholder vote, but if it fails, you lose everything. You'll be ruined. It's a true all-in moment. We're not selling, Anya said to Chloe, her voice unwavering. She turned from the window, her eyes reflecting the city's infinite points of light. Call Julian. Tell him to execute the final purchase. We're going all in. Anya, this is insane, Chloe pleaded. You're betting the entire company, your entire life, on a revenge fantasy. It stopped being about revenge a long time ago. Chloe, Anya replied, her voice soft but absolute. He started a fire to destroy my future because of something that happened in my father's past. He built an empire on my stolen research. This isn't about payback anymore. This is about taking back what's mine. This is about justice. The final transaction was completed in the pre-market hours. A single, massive block trade that sent shudders through the financial world. By the time the opening bell rang on Wall Street, Anya Sharma, through her network of holding companies, was the single largest shareholder of Ethelred Incorporated, controlling just over 28% of the company. The Ethelred annual shareholder meeting was less than a week away. Marcus Thorne would be walking onto that stage believing he had won. He had no idea he was walking into a trap he had unwittingly spent his entire life helping to build. The main auditorium of the Lincoln Center was a cathedral of corporate power, packed with over 2,000 Ethelred shareholders, analysts, and journalists. The event was being live-streamed to a global audience of millions. On stage, a massive screen displayed the Ethelred logo against a backdrop of pristine laboratories and smiling, diverse faces, a carefully constructed image of benevolent innovation. At the center of it all, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlights, stood Marcus Thorne. He was at the height of his power, delivering a triumphant keynote address. He spoke of record profits, of life-saving drugs, and of a future defined by Ethelred's vision. He was charming, confident, and utterly in control. He made a passing, dismissive reference to the recent, failed market manipulation by a desperate competitor, a clear jab at the chaos he had inflicted upon Phoenix Bio. A ripple of knowing laughter went through the audience. Anya watched from a seat in the 10th row. She was dressed in a simple, elegant black suit, an island of stillness in a sea of nervous energy. Beside her sat Chloe, who looked as if she were about to be physically ill. Leo was stationed in a mobile command unit a block away, ready to deploy the evidence. Julian Croft was watching from London, his team poised to react to market shifts in real time. And so, as we look to the next fiscal year, Marcus concluded, his voice swelling with manufactured passion, I promise you, this Ethelred will not just lead. We will dominate. We will define the future of human health. Thank you. The auditorium erupted in applause. Marcus basked in it, a broad, satisfied smile on his face. He then moved to a podium to begin the obligatory Q&A session. The first few questions were softballs from friendly analysts, praising his leadership. Then, a microphone attendant approached Anya's row. The floor recognizes Anya Sharma of Phoenix Bio. The moderator announced. A sudden, shocked silence fell over the room. Heads craned, cameras swiveled. Marcus's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, his eyes narrowing as he saw her rise. He recovered quickly, his expression shifting to one of amused condescension. Dr. Sharma, he said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. An unexpected pleasure. I hope you're not here to ask for a loan. More laughter, this time more pointed. Anya ignored it. She walked calmly to the aisle microphone. the spotlight following her. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, her voice clear and amplified throughout the auditorium. "I'm actually here as a shareholder, the largest shareholder. In fact." The silence that followed was absolute. 1,000 jaws dropped in unison. On the giant screen behind Marcus, a live stock ticker, which had been steadily green, began to flicker. The Ethelred stock price AET dipped. Marcus's face went pale. "That's a ridiculous assertion." "Is it?" Anya asked calmly. "Perhaps the board members, with whom I met this morning, could confirm that Washington Holdings LLC, in which I am the sole principal, now controls 28% of Ethelred's voting shares." On stage, several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding Marcus's panicked gaze. The AET ticker dipped again, more sharply this time. "I only have one question, Marcus," Anya continued. "It's about your flagship antiviral, EthelV. You've called its discovery a miracle of innovation. I'd like to discuss that miracle. Could you please put image file Phoenix 1 on the main screen?" In his van, Leo typed a command. On the screen behind Marcus, two complex molecular diagrams appeared side by side. "The molecule on the right," Anya explained, "is the active compound in EthelV. The one on the left is from my doctoral research, dated 12 years ago. Research I was told was destroyed in a fire at my lab." A wave of gasps and frantic whispers swept the room. Marcus stared at the screen, his composure finally cracking. This is an absurd fabrication. A desperate attempt to smear this company." "Is it?" Anya asked again, her voice like ice. "Let's look at Phoenix 2. The screen changed to show the employment history of Ethelred's lead scientist on the EthelV project. It showed he had been a postdoctoral fellow at Anya's university, with access to the server where her research had been stored, right up until the week before the fire. He was hired by Ethelred the month after. The AET ticker turned red and began to plummet. "You're a thief, Marcus," Anya said, her voice dropping, yet carrying an immense weight of authority. "You built your crowning achievement on my stolen work." "This is slander," Marcus roared, his face flushed with rage. He was losing control. The mask of civility shattered. "You have no proof." "Oh, but I do," Anya said softly. "But we can get to that in a moment. First, I want to talk about why you did it. It wasn't just about the money, was it? It was about my father, Samir Sharma." At the mention of her father's name, a dark, primal rage ignited in Marcus's eyes. He lunged towards the microphone. "Your father," he spat, the word a venomous curse. The live stream was broadcasting his meltdown to the entire world. "Your father was a fraud who destroyed my family. He ruined my father, left him with nothing. So yes, I took from you. I took your research. I took your lab. I took your future. An eye for an eye. Anya, your father destroyed my legacy. So I burned yours to the ground." He had confessed, in his hubris, his rage. He had admitted to the arson in front of thousands of witnesses and millions online. The room was in chaos. People were shouting, filming on their phones. The stock was in freefall. Anya stood motionless amidst the pandemonium. This was the moment. The final blow. "Leo," she said into the tiny microphone pinned to her lapel, "display the final file. Phoenix proof." She held up a small tablet. Its screen synced to the main display. On it was the first page of a sworn, notarized affidavit from the security guard who had worked at her old lab building. He confessed that Marcus Thorne had paid him $10,000 to disable the sprinkler system and report a faulty wire on the night of the fire. It was the final, undeniable proof of arson. Marcus was finished. But as her finger hovered over the button to swipe to the next page, her eyes caught the last lines of text at the bottom of the screen. A section of the file she had not reviewed in the frantic final hours. It was a transcript of a follow-up interview Leo had conducted with the security guard, a detail he had included for completeness. "Why did you do it?" Leo's typed question read. "I lost everything in the Omnigen collapse." The guard's transcribed answer began, "We all did. My pension was wiped out. Thorne wasn't the only one who got paid to look the other way. Dr. Sharma, Anya's dad, he knew the company was going under. He told a few of his people to sell their stock before the announcement. He saved them. But he let the rest of us get wiped out. My family lost everything. So when Marcus Thorne came to me years later, yeah, I took his money. Seemed like justice at the time." The world stopped. The air left Anya's lungs. The sounds of the chaotic room faded into a dull roar. The final evidence, the key to her victory, was also the instrument that would destroy her own father's legacy. It would recategorize him from a brilliant scientist to a man who had committed insider trading, saving his friends while letting hundreds of small investors, like the guard, and Robert Thorne be financially annihilated. She looked up at Marcus, who was now being restrained by security, his face a mask of triumphant hatred. He believed he had won, that his confession was meaningless without proof. She looked at the faces in the audience, hungry for the final, bloody act. In that single, agonizing moment, Anya was trapped. Expose Marcus, and she would prove her father was a criminal. Stay silent, and Marcus would walk away. Her own justice incomplete. The world held its breath, waiting for her choice. The choice was not a choice at all. It was a precipice. For a split second that stretched into an eternity, Anya saw two futures branch before her. In one, she swiped the screen, and the world learned of two villains, Marcus Thorne, the arsonist, and Samir Sharma, the man whose ethical failure had planted the seeds of that fire. Her victory would be absolute, but it would be built on the ruins of her father's name. In the other, she lowered the tablet, and Marcus's confession would forever be an unsubstantiated outburst. He said. She said that his lawyers would spin into a tale of corporate rivalry gone too far. But there was a third path, the one her father had always taught her to look for the elegant solution. Her gaze flickered from Marcus's snarling face to the plummeting stock ticker on the screen behind him. His confession to arson was a moral victory, but she didn't need it to win the war. She had other weapons. Anya lowered the tablet. A wave of confusion rippled through the audience. Marcus let out a short, triumphant laugh, thinking she had blinked. "You have nothing." "Do you?" he sneered, still struggling against the guards. "Just lies." Anya turned her attention back to the microphone, her composure a chilling counterpoint to his unraveling. "You're right, Marcus. Proving arson after 12 years is difficult," she said, her voice resonating with a newfound calm. "So, let's talk about something much easier to prove. Let's talk about wire fraud." She looked directly at the front row, where the chairman of the board and the company's general counsel were sitting, their faces ashen. "Let's talk about the SEC filings for Ethel V," Anya continued, her voice sharp and precise. "Filings in which you, Marcus, and your executive team repeatedly swore that the drug was the result of Ethelred's internal research and development. Filings that were used to secure billions of dollars from investors and government contracts." She raised her tablet again, but this time a different file was on the screen. It was not the guard's affidavit. It was a series of internal Ethelred emails, uncovered by Leo, between Marcus and his head of R&D. In them, they explicitly discussed the S protocol, clearly referring to her Sharma research, and detailed the strategy to reverse engineer it and pass it off as their own discovery. These emails, which have been authenticated and forwarded to the SEC and the Southern District of New York Federal Prosecutor's Office 10 minutes ago, constitute a clear and undeniable case of securities fraud, intellectual property theft, and conspiracy. Anya announced, "You didn't just burn down my lab. Marcus, you lied to your shareholders, you lied to the market, and you lied to the federal government. Arson may be hard to prove. A decade-long conspiracy to commit fraud, with a digital paper trail, is not." It was a masterstroke. She had abandoned the personal vengeance of the fire for the cold, irrefutable hammer of financial crime. The board understood immediately. The shareholders understood. Marcus Thorne, his face draining of all color, finally understood. He hadn't just been outmaneuvered, he had been surgically dismantled. Security led him from the stage, no longer struggling. A man hollowed out. The chairman of the board stumbled to the podium and, in a quavering voice, announced an emergency session and suspended trading of Ethelred stock. The meeting was over. Anya had won. She hadn't needed to destroy her father's legacy to do it. But the knowledge of his failure settled in her chest like a cold, heavy stone. Later that evening, Anya sat with her father in his quiet, book-lined room. The news was everywhere, replaying the dramatic scenes from the shareholder meeting. Marcus Thorne had been taken into federal custody. The Ethelred board had voted to remove him and had offered Anya the position of interim CEO and chairwoman, an offer she had accepted. Samir was watching the city lights, his back to the television. The tremors in his hands were more pronounced tonight. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The truth of his past, of the Omnigen collapse and the guard's confession, hung unspoken in the air between them. "You chose wisely," Samir finally whispered, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. It sounded like a mixture of pride and shame. Anya walked over and knelt beside his chair, taking his trembling hand in hers. "I learned from the best," she said softly. He turned to look at her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "No, you didn't," he said, his voice cracking. "You learned to be better than me. I was arrogant. I thought I could control everything. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, trying to protect a few people, and it cost so many others. It cost Robert Thorne everything." He squeezed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "What Marcus did to you, that fire, the seeds of it were sown by me. I am so sorry. Anya." It was the confession she had never known she needed. A quiet acknowledgement of a hidden truth that had shaped all their lives. She rested her head on his knee. The weight of the day, the years, finally crashing down on her. They sat there in the fading light, a father and daughter, bound not just by love, but by the complicated, messy truth of their shared history. She had achieved her justice, but she also understood its cost. The cycle of revenge, she realized, had not been broken by her victory. It had been broken by this moment of grace. 1 year later, the autumn air was crisp and carried the scent of rain-washed pavement. Anya stood on a stage, but this one was different. It was a simple wooden platform set on a sweep of green lawn, overlooking the East River. Behind her stood a stunning new building of glass and reclaimed timber, a marvel of sustainable architecture that seemed to hum with purpose. This was the site of her old, burned-down lab. Today, it was the site of its rebirth. After taking control of Ethelred, Anya had not dismantled it. She had performed a corporate transplant. She merged the best of Ethelred's resources and distribution power with Phoenix Bio's innovative and ethical culture. The new combined entity was rechristened Viridian Dynamics, a name that signified growth and truth. Under her leadership, the company had not only stabilized, but had thrived, redirecting its focus toward accessible medicine and transparent research. A significant portion of the profits was funneled directly into the non-profit she was dedicating today. 12 years ago, on this very spot, I lost my first laboratory in a fire, Anya said, her voice clear and strong, carrying over the assembled crowd of students, scientists, city officials, and her own employees. I learned then that things can be taken from you, your work, your resources, your reputation. But what cannot be taken is your purpose. Today, we are not just dedicating a building. We are dedicating a new purpose for this ground. This is the Phoenix Institute. Her father sat in the front row, bundled in a warm coat, a proud, frail smile on his face. Chloe stood beside him, her eyes shining. The Phoenix Institute, Anya continued, is a non-profit incubator for young, under-resourced innovators in the life sciences. It is a place for those with brilliant ideas, but without access to capital or connections. It is a sanctuary for the kind of research that is too bold, too new, or not immediately profitable for the mainstream market. We will fund the dreamers, the outsiders, the ones who are told their ideas are impossible. We will not let another spark of genius be extinguished by accident or by design. The applause was heartfelt, a genuine celebration of creation over destruction. She had used the power she had fought so hard for not to punish, but to build. She had broken the cycle. Later, as the reception buzzed around her, Anya walked through the sun-drenched atrium of the new institute. The main wall was a living tapestry of green ferns and moss, a symbol of life and renewal. A young woman, barely out of college, approached her nervously, clutching a tablet. "Dr. Sharma, I'm Kayla, one of the first fellows here at the Institute." The young woman's eyes were bright with a fierce, unmistakable intelligence that reminded Anya so much of herself at that age. "I know you're busy, but I had an idea for a new approach to CRISPR protein delivery. It's probably nothing, but—" Anya smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "It's never nothing," she said, taking the tablet. "Show me. We have all the time in the world." As she looked at the complex equations on the screen, listening to the young scientist explain her revolutionary idea with breathless passion, Anya felt a profound sense of peace. The ghosts of the past were finally quiet. She had faced her dragon, not to slay it, but to harness its fire. Marcus Thorne was serving a long sentence in a federal prison. A forgotten headline. Her father was living out his final years in peace, his legacy not erased, but redefined by his daughter's compassion. And she, Anya Sharma, stood not in the ashes of her past, but in the heart of the vibrant future she had built from them, ready to nurture the next flame,